So X23, we're not going to be able to review just yet because we haven't unlocked her levels 80 potential. And if you haven't heard or you haven't seen from someone else or tried yourself, she's pretty underwhelming at level 70. And unlike Dakin, she doesn't even have PvP viability because she lacks iframe ignore. So that's going to have to wait for another day. Tomorrow or the next day, when I'll be able to cover her, and hopefully show you something that's worth even considering, because right now this is not even worth considering, which means it's not really worth talking about, which is why we didn't even make a video on rescue. What I wanted to talk about instead was basically the fact that we are getting characters like tier 4 X23 now, like tier 4 War Machine, like tier 4 Hulkbuster, and what that essentially signals to the player base is, and you know this, you just haven't maybe thought about it this way, or we haven't had this conversation yet, and frankly I wasn't thinking about it either. We've basically oversaturated on really good tier 4s, and that doesn't mean we're never going to get good tier 4s again, but it means that the days of looking around the corner and thinking and saying, okay, the next tier 4, okay, we just got Namor tier 4, he's good, the next tier 4 is going to be even better. Right, that was literally how tier 4s were for a while, right? You had tier 4 Iron Man come out first. It was, man, I mean, okay, Black Widow was a disappointment for sure, but she wasn't like terrible. She was just not better than Iron Man. But then Moon Knight comes out and he's a little bit better, and then Thor came out and he was a little bit better, and it just kept scaling that way for a while. Hulk came through and completely changed the meta for PvP as a new tier 4. Then Carnage came and changed it even more. Do you see what I mean? Like, if you go back and you trace those early tier 4s, you're like, holy shit, bro. Every update had something new. Every update was like grabbing you by the neck, and that's why I was buying tier 4 packs. That's why people were wailing out for that stuff, right? Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. Nowadays, even though it's only been a little over 2 years, not quite 2 years and a half, but it's still long enough that we've basically hit the point where we get bad tier 4s now. And we get bad tier 4s because essentially they want to keep pumping out tier 4s for the collectors, but at the same time, there's just not enough people working on this game to justify. And the reason why we've started to get bad tier 4s and lazy tier 4s mixed in with the good ones from a yearly standpoint of view is because there's simply not enough people working on this game, and there probably have never been, for them to adequately balance the characters, every single update. And that could be an excuse. I don't really want to make it the focus of the video, like speculating on why they can't make every tier 4 good, but it's sort of just like, I think of it as in a way it's laziness, obviously. In a way it's like, cost cutting, or they're budgeting or whatever. That's fine. The game is old, sure. I want it to keep going longer rather than burn brighter and faster. But at the same time, in a way, it's the law of large numbers. Even if you had the best balancing possible, and they made Doom better, and they made Hulkbuster better, and they made War Machine better, there still has to be a worst tier 4. This is what people maybe don't think about as well. And I, to be honest, I don't think about it that often either. There has to be a worst tier 4. There has to be a Cyclops or someone like that who's just like, oh yeah, that's the worst tier 4 that everyone avoids, right? Naturally, when you're ranking characters aggressively, and update by update the way that we do on this channel and other channels, you are going to reach that conclusion sooner or later, right? So yeah, okay, if they balance out every tier 4 and they make every tier 4 good, sure, maybe it takes us a little bit longer to realize that Echo is the worst tier 4, or a little bit longer to realize whatever, it's Cyclops or it's Ebony Maw, but we will get there, and then players will still have those same feelings. So part of it, I feel like, is just inevitable. But I also wanted to point out that it's over 2 years now, and if you look back 2 years after they introduced tier 3, just to use a bit of the history of the game to sort of maybe not guess where we're going, but sort of see how the devs kind of responded to change. 2 years after they introduced tier 3, when they introduced tier 3 Captain America, and everyone was like, whoa, so cool, right? So they introduced tier 3 Captain America with this Infinity War update, I believe. Yeah, this was the first tier 3 in the game. And this is where we got this animation, and it was like, wow, you get a new animation. That's so cool. Tier 3 is so awesome, right? Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. It was with this update that they basically, you know, they power crept the game, they introduced tier 3, all well and good. And then 2 years later, right, in 2020, what did they do? They released the Warriors of the Sky. And they basically split tier 3 in half. And that's what transcended characters are. They were the devs' attempt to cash in on and sort of like increase the cost of tier 3. Because now, instead of releasing one tier 3 character or two tier 3 characters with every update, they're like, you know what, we're going to release like 2 or 3 transcended characters and a tier 3. And we're going to sell you these new materials, these awakening crystals, and these mandalays, right? I don't need to, you know, go through and explain every little step-by-step thing, but that's what it was, right? Yeah, that's what it was. And again, you guys, if you guys, you know, want me to remind you, because it's crazy, the characters that they released shortly thereafter, they released Transcended Red Guardian, and for the Black Widow update, and Transcended Yelena. Yelena was good, don't get me wrong. Red Guardian, not so much. Right away, just a few months after the Awakening system came out, they started dropping turds. You know? They started dropping turds. And there wasn't as many bad tier 3. There were still bad tier 3s released, for sure. There wasn't as many bad tier 3s. I mean, shit, they gave Black Bolt a tier 3 at the time. When they were giving Medusa a tier 3, when they were giving Medusa Transcendence, and he wasn't even that good, right? It was when they released this Marvel's X. He was like okay. He was okay. He was kind of hard to play. He was kind of squishy, but he wasn't that good. And again, that was about 2.5 years. That was about where we are relative to when tier 3s were released. So they basically just see it that way, and it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, we already have bad tier 4s. So I think maybe it seems a bit worse now. The balancing is a little bit worse now than it was before. I can understand that. I can agree with that for sure. I think the devs absolutely could do a better job balancing. At the same time, is it kind of inevitable that they get some of the characters wrong and some of them are bad? Yeah, unfortunately it is. I think the bigger problem, however, is not that the devs need to hire more people to balance tier 4s. I actually don't think that's the answer. I think what the answer is, and what we've been waiting for a long time, me personally as well, is that the game revolves around tier 4s a lot, but there's not enough. Like, the game revolves around tier 4s, but not in the sense that, like, man, we're just like waiting for these new tier 4s to go and plug into this game mode. It's more just like, okay, there's not really much else to do in the game, so I'm gonna wait for these tier 4s. To see if I have something new to do myself, right? And it's kind of like build your own adventure, you know, build a bear or whatever kind of thing. That's why I'm waiting for this new game mode. I'm hoping that this new game mode is very, very good, is basically tier 4 only. I know it's got good rewards. I know it's a lot to peg your hopes on, but basically they need the game to revolve even more around tier 4s, if I could put it that way. I know some people don't want to hear what I'm saying here, or they don't agree with me, which is fine. It's fine if you don't agree. And you can sound off in the comments below if you don't. But I think the game needs to revolve even more around tier 4 characters, in the sense that it gives more worth to all of the other ones rather than just amplifying the worth of the few, right? Because you don't really need, we've talked about this a lot in the game, you don't really need that many characters to clear most of the content in the game, and that's good for some parts of the game and good for some segments of the player base, and then it's bad for other segments of the player base because it makes the game feel really boring. You're like, oh, I already tier 4'd Luna, I already tier 4'd Ghost Rider, I already tier 4'd Jean. Well, there's really not much else you need after those 3, right? There's like maybe 5 or 6 tier 4s you really need for PvE, and then there's another like 3 to 4 tier 4s that you really do need if you want to, you know, not struggle and get punched around in PvP constantly. But once you're done with that, we're talking like 12, 15 tier 4s tops, right? I'm not the biggest spender out there for tier 4s, and I got more than double that. And I'm sitting on enough materials to go in tier 4 like 3 or 4 other characters. So I could have close to 40, right? But the point is that I have no incentive to, and most players don't. So when you get an update with Hulkbuster tier 4, when you get an update with X23 tier 4, it's not so much that the character is bad relative to other tier 4s. It's that there's not enough there's basically too many pegs and not enough holes. They're giving us more keys than there are doors to unlock. So obviously, if they give you a rusted ass key like this, or they give you a key that's very brittle and gonna break like this, you're like, why would I use those? I could just take my shiny new key that is indestructible and works on the first try. I'm just gonna use my shiny new key that I got 2 years ago, and click, boom, the door is open. You know, I'm just gonna get my shiny new key from 3-4 months ago, boom, click, and we're done. So I think they need to make the game revolve more around tier 4s. Quick way to do that would just be, you know, dispatch sector tier 4 only. You know, upgrade the difficulty of Giant Boss Raid, add someone after Dormammu, or rescale it so that Dormammu is even more difficult, and make Dormammu tier 4 only. They basically just need to do that. The game needs to transition to fully embrace and fully highlight tier 4s, because it's otherwise we're just dragging these characters down too much, right? There's too much overlap in the places that you can use X23, and then you can use regular tier 3s and regular transcendent characters. And there should be more distinction to highlight the value of these characters, because right now I have to compare Hulkbuster to the gods of Marvel Future. I'm comparing Hulkbuster to Wolverine. What's going on here? Was there any world in which we thought Hulkbuster was going to compete with Wolverine? Like, let's put it that way, right? The most popular Marvel character, essentially, or the second most popular Marvel character of all time, versus something that's not even a person. It's just an empty suit of armor that gets piloted by an AI. Like, what are we talking about here? That was never going to happen. Hulkbuster was never going to be better than Wolverine. There's no game. There's no situation where Hulkbuster's better than Wolverine. Obviously, that's fine, right? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with Hulkbuster being worse than Wolverine. But then we still need somewhere for Hulkbuster to go. And Conquest and Shadowland cannot be the fucking answer, right? That cannot be the end of the answer, because that's just depressing. That's just depressing. Those game modes are just not good enough. So, yeah. We need more focus and more of a lean towards tier 4 only content, and hopefully that's coming soon. And hopefully they adjust existing content to be tier 4 only, so that you know, it gives rise to more value for some of these characters. Anyways, that's my take on it. I know it's not the most popular take. I know it's not the most agreeable take, but yeah, I think ultimately that's the best way to go about it, rather than sitting here trying to balance all these characters, and then we're still going to find out that Hulkbuster's the worst, perchance, or somebody else, and then we're just right back where we started. Anywho, hit me up in the comments down below. Smash like if you enjoy the content, or if you don't, hit the thumbs down, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.